what vegetables can you sow in April? And that's a really good question to ask to an experienced vegetable grower who will probably spend well over an hour just listing the vegetables. There are so many. But in this video, rather than produce a really lengthy video that you probably wouldn't watch till the end anyway, which could go on for an hour or even 2 hours, I've selected 4 vegetables which I'm going to recommend that you sow in April. I'm also going to recommend 4 that you don't, so it's well worth watching the video just to get some ideas. If you do like this video, don't forget to give it the thumbs up, and if you want to subscribe to the channel for future videos on how to sow and grow fruit and veg and 1 or 2 recipe ideas, don't forget to press the subscribe button. Now, a fantastic vegetable to start with that can be sown in April is French beans. You can get climbing French beans, which are my preference and which is what I will grow, or you can get the lower bush variety of French beans, which don't grow quite high. Either way, you will get a really good crop of beans with a little bit of care and attention. Now, in April, it depends upon the last frost date in your area. Now, I'm located in the middle of the UK in Zone 8, and our last frost date here is round about the end of April. So for me to sow these in April directly outside, I would need to make sure that there was no possibility of frost. So what I may end up doing with these is starting them in early April inside in pots, and then when they're large enough, transplant them outside. So there's a lot of varieties of French beans on the market to choose from. I always prefer the climbing French beans, and this year I'm going a variety called Blue Lake. So what I'm going to do in early April is put these in cell trays in multi-purpose compost, put the seeds round about 3 to 5 centimetres deep, cover them with compost. In 7 to 14 days they'll germinate, but I will leave them in my poly house until they get to a reasonable size, and when the temperature is good enough I'll plant them directly outside. You can plant these later in the year. They can go in May, directly outside, and by that time the last risk of frost should have gone and it should be fine to plant them outside. So if you are going to plant them directly outside, prepare a short trench for them, put them into the ground at round about the same depth, 3 to 5 centimetres, round about 12 to 18 inches apart, and then just cover them with multi-purpose compost. When the seedlings start to emerge outside, you might need to give them a little bit of protection in terms of netting, just till they get to a certain size, because birds may peck at them and they tend to like young seedlings, so just bear that in mind. If you are going to grow climbing French beans like I'm growing, you will need some form of support. I have this metal fencing here, but you can easily provide that level of support with canes. You can put canes up, put them in a wigwam. You can get different types of netting that will support climbing vegetables like French beans. And when they start to grow, they will automatically find their way up the support, so you don't need to do an awful lot for them. So a fantastic vegetable to sow in April is French beans. Now, April is the perfect month to sow potatoes. It is possible to sow them in March if the climate in your local area allows. And just like we mentioned with the French beans, you've got to keep an eye on your last frost date. If you sow them too early, there's a possibility that they could be affected by frost, which is not good for them. A lot of people think that frost will kill the potatoes, and if there's a severe frost it won't do them any favours, but it does definitely slow their growth down. So really you don't want to be too eager to sow your potatoes until you're confident in your local area that there's no possibility of frost. Now, with potatoes there's lots of varieties available, from first earlies, second earlies to main crop. So if you want an early harvest, then you'll go for your first earlies and so on. Now, for first earlies, I've got a variety here called Swift, which I'll be planting at the beginning of April. It does say for a first early, you can sow these in late March, but I always generally wait till April. Not grown Swift before as a first early, but I have grown varieties like Rooster and Charlottes, which are excellent, so we'll see how they get on. Or you could go for your main crop, and I've got a main crop potato that viewers of the channel will know that I grow every year, which is Desiree, and I'll plant these a couple of weeks after the first earlies in mid-April, but they can be sown right up until the end of April. There is a video on my channel showing you how to plant potatoes right from buying them up until harvest, and it talks about things like chitting and the planting and harvest dates for the different types of potatoes, so do check that out, and I'll put a link to that video in the comments below. There's a number of ways in which you can plant potatoes. In the past I've used a traditional method where I've dug them into the ground, so I will dig a hole round about 6 to 8 inches deep, put the potato in and then cover it over, and then just go for the usual process of trenching up, and all this is on the video that I mentioned. But this year, for the first time, I'm going to trial no dig. My potatoes are going to go in this area behind me here, and the reason that I can try no dig this year is because I've got a reasonable quantity of my own compost that I've made. So definitely check out the channel later in the year to see how I get on with no dig, and I will be doing a video showing you how I'm planting using the no dig method. So April is the ideal month for sowing your potatoes. So something else I recommend sowing in April is parsnips. You may read that it's best to sow parsnips in February and March, but I've definitely found it more successful over the last few years sowing in late March or early April. Now these will go directly into the ground. Parsnips are not a great vegetable that transplant very well. So it's always best to sow parsnips in a nice sunny position in free draining fertile soil, but there is a bit of preparation that needs to be done for the ground because parsnips are a root vegetable, so they grow downwards. So therefore you need to make sure that the ground is dug over and remove as many stones as you possibly can to make it as fine as possible. So as the parsnips start to develop, they're not interrupted by stones, which is where you'll get the parsnips that are all very, very rooty because they keep being split. So good preparation will help to get better parsnips. So make sure before you sow your parsnips, you do that bit of prep just to give your parsnips the best chance of growing. Now parsnip seeds are almost like little flakes and they shouldn't be planted too deep. So what I will do after I've prepared the ground is run my finger into the soil just very gently and then place the parsnip seeds and sow them very thinly and then just cover it back over with multi-purpose compost and give them a water. Now parsnip seeds are usually quite slow to germinate, but if you're sowing in late March or early April when the temperature is a little bit warmer, you should start to see them appear after about 14 to 21 days. So when the seedlings do start to appear to the ground, just make sure they're regularly weeded and they have a good supply of water. Now I'll be growing two varieties of parsnips this year. The first one is something called Hollow Crown, which I grew last year, and that produced some really nice parsnips. And the other variety is called Sabre, which is a free packet of seeds that I got from my last online order. So parsnips are an excellent vegetable to sow in April. Now the fourth vegetable that I'm going to recommend sowing in April is swedes. This is one that I've just harvested and I've had these in all over the winter period. I had a massive harvest of these, really pleased with them. I'm definitely going to grow the same variety this year, which is a variety called Helena. Now Swede is short for Swedish turnip and they're a very hardy variety of vegetables. So if your soil isn't particularly fine, maybe you've even got a clay type of consistency, Swedes are still going to be fine in that type of environment. Now Swedes can be sown directly outside in April, but like a lot of vegetables, I tend to prefer to start them indoors in cell trays. And when the seedlings are the right size and the temperature's better outside, I'll transplant them. I did that last year and it worked really well. In fact, there is a video on my channel showing you how I planted my Swedes and what I did differently last year that made a massive difference. And that was adding a small quantity of fish blood and bone to provide nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium to the soil just before I transplanted them, and also cover them with netting as well, because you want to try and protect the leaves as much as possible because that helps them to feed, and that's when you get a really good crop of Swedes. So definitely check out that video if you want to know how to plant out and maintain Swedes, or in some parts of the world they're called rutabaga. I'll put a link to that video in the comments below so you can check it out for yourselves. Now Swedes are a long-term crop and they will take around about 6 months to mature fully, and they do like a lot of water, so in dry periods make sure that you are watering them regularly. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there are one or two vegetables that I would also suggest that you avoid sowing in April, mainly because when we get to April, it's just getting that little bit late in the year to actually start growing them. So things like onion seeds is one that I would recommend that you avoid starting to sow in April. I normally will sow mine in January, in the beginning of January, which I have done, or you can sow them into February. When you get to April, it starts to get a little bit late. Something else that I recommend that you avoid sowing in April is hot peppers. Now these, again, just like the onions, like to be sown in January and February, and they normally need to be sown in propagators or somewhere where there's a temperature of 20 to 25 degrees C. When we start to get to April, if you start to germinate them, it's unlikely that those plants are going to mature enough in order to give you the harvest that you'd want. So I would definitely recommend that you don't sow hot peppers. There are some varieties of peppers like bell peppers and sweet peppers that might be okay to sow in April, but just not your hot peppers, like your Butjolokia that I've sown, Carolina Reaper I've sown, and other hot peppers like that, maybe habaneros, that are just too late in April to sow. Now something else that I don't recommend that you sow in April because I think it's too late is garlic. Now these garlic that you can see behind me, they were sown in November last year, and garlic do like cold temperatures. In fact, they need cold temperatures between 0 and 10 degrees centigrade over a period of time in order for the bulbs to split. So when we get to April, the temperature is too warm and you won't get that cold temperatures that they need. So garlic should be sown really anytime from November, possibly till the end of February, maybe into early March for some varieties, but definitely when you get to April it's too late. So if you have bought some garlic, then keep hold of them and just wait until definitely the end of October, but into November, till the temperature gets a bit cooler, which would be a perfect time to plant them. Now my final vegetable to avoid sowing in April is a personal preference, and you might not agree with this, and that's absolutely fine, but over the last couple of years I stopped growing broccoli. And the reason I started growing broccoli is that where I am, I've just found that the amount of work involved and the amount of space it takes up for the amount of broccoli I get is just not worthwhile for me. And I could easily use the land that I would have sown it in to be much more productive with other vegetables. So I won't be sowing broccoli in April, but that's just my recommendation. I know there's lots of people out there that love broccoli and grow it very, very well. But I think what it demonstrates is sometimes vegetables for certain people will be very different compared to the experience of others. But for me, broccoli is definitely something I won't be sowing in April. Of course, for the purposes of this video, it's worth mentioning that the sowing and growing times may vary depending upon your climate, basically where you are in the world. I'm in zone 8A in the UK, so check out your growing zone and check the backs of your packet just to confirm when you can plant your vegetables. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, there is such a range of vegetables available to sow in April. It really comes down to personal preference. But I hope my 4 suggestions are giving you 1 or 2 ideas and something to think about, and also the ones that I've recommended that you should avoid. Some of those, as you've heard, are just personal preference, and you may be perfectly happy growing them yourselves. Now, there are other videos on the channel showing you what seeds to sow in March, and I will put a link in that below, because a lot of the vegetables recommended in that video are also applicable to April, so definitely have a look at that for some further ideas. Now, if you do like this video, don't forget to give it the thumbs up, and if you want to subscribe to the channel for future videos on how to sow and grow fruit and veg and 1 or 2 recipe ideas, don't forget to press the subscribe button, and I'll see you all on the next video.